Dorothy Nakabugo, who is the Executive Director of Uwezo Uganda, to pick our thoughts on the 2020 results. A very good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. A great pleasure, Sandra. Thank you very much for inviting me. Well, when you look at the results that have just gotten released, what are the key things that stand out for you? You know, bearing in mind that they've come out at a time we are still dealing with the pandemic, but they were also done during the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Sandra. For me, it's a sweet, bitter situation. There's a lot to celebrate. So even doing the examinations is a celebration, but also given the fact that more kids, more children actually sat for the examination, but also you have more girls completing the primary education cycle, and overall, there has been a slight improvement in terms of children or students who qualify for post-primary education. But the bitter side of it, and which makes me a lot sad, is that we still have a learning crisis. If you look at, for example, you have more girls completing the primary education cycle, but they're also underperforming. So apart from where they did better than boys in English, other subjects they somehow underperformed. But also you had more girls failing than boys. But also the other part that makes me a little sad is the 74,000 plus, or the 10% that completely failed. So that means you have these tens of thousands of kids who went through the primary education cycle without benefiting anything. But also the persistent underperformance of children in UPE schools. That makes me a little uncomfortable. In a way here we are celebrating the rich and the urban kids, because if you look at the difference between the performance between UPE and non-UPE schools, you have 24% passing in Division 1 in UPE schools versus 5% in non-UPE schools, rather 24%, and then 5% in UPE schools, where the majority of our children are. So how do we ensure that every child, it's actually a right that every child who goes through especially the basic education system, actually learns that they're not just there for the sake of it. So that is kind of sad. But another part is the issue that has always been highlighted by UNEB, that when it comes to problem-solving questions, application questions, students or children actually struggle. Are we preparing children who are rote learners? Are we actually here celebrating rote learners rather than people who can actually engage with the world in a very meaningful way? So those are things that still are outstanding, that as we celebrate,
there are also some key things to consider.
To really address.
Well, speak to us. We've seen that more learners have qualified for post-primary education, and we just want to understand, what do you attribute this to? Is it the parents taking up charge and saying we're going to homeschool our children? Is it the different interventions that were put in place? Or we've also seen a story where they're mentioning that some districts allowed primary 6 students to sit for these examinations. What do you attribute the fact that we are seeing more pupils qualifying for post-primary education?
Thank you very much. And I think, again, that's something also to take forward, even when the pandemic is over. I think what we saw with this situation, the crisis in which we are, everybody rallied behind the children to ensure that, much as the schools are closed, learning has to continue. The parents at home did their job, the siblings, the adults at home, but also the teachers tried, also government tried to ensure that there were some initiatives to ensure that there was continuity of learning. So I think the change of mindset to say that learning does not only take place
in a school setting,
it can't take place anywhere. That's something that we really need to take forward and ensure that irrespective of whatever happens, children can learn. But also, I think the pandemic is pushing us to think. These primary 7 kids only studied for maybe half a year, 6 months, but they actually completed, and we are seeing some successes. So can we compress our curriculum? Maybe are we thinking of, in the future, of maybe 6 years of primary education and release some resources for pre-primary, which is also a very big foundation to ensure that kids actually acquire literacy and numeracy skills much faster if they have that level of education.
From your own perspective, how does the future look like for the education system in Uganda? Just to pick your thoughts on that. So many people are still worried. We are seeing the issue of double senior ones. The fact that these results have come out simply means that we're having two different batches that would ideally be preparing for senior one. How does the future of education in this country look like in the midst of this pandemic that we are all dealing with?
I think one thing that we need to understand is that there is a crisis, and that it can no longer be business as usual. And we have seen that we have the capacity actually to address the crisis. So yes, there's a worry that you have two senior ones, but also the curriculum can be compressed without losing much, with just focusing on the basic competences that kids have to acquire at this level of education. Then you can first push or make the others in the pipeline progress, as the ones who have just got their results out wait a bit, maybe 3 to 4 months.
Yes.
But again, it's a worry for all of us as educationists that the prolonged closure of schools, when actually even before the pandemic, learning outcomes were very low. It means that quite a number of kids have fallen far behind. So as the schools reopen, and I hope they reopen pretty soon because COVID is quite here with us for some time, as they reopen, we have to ensure that kids are coming back at different levels, so there must be catch-up programs to ensure that those who fell behind can actually catch up and benefit and get the best out of the education system.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Mary Goreti Nakabogo, who is the Executive Director of Uwezo, joining us tonight and sharing with us our thoughts on the just released